The great hall of Nexus Prime stretched for kilometers in every direction, its crystalline walls catching the light of 3 artificial suns that hung suspended in the void above. And Ambassador Elena Vasquez had never felt so small in her entire life. She stood at the center of a circular platform that floated above an endless drop into darkness, surrounded by thousands of alien delegates from hundreds of species, each one representing civilizations that had conquered the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. The HFY delegation occupied an entire section of the hall, their insectoid bodies clicking and chittering as they communicated through complex pheromone signals that filled the air with strange chemical scents. And their compound eyes reflected Elena's image 1,000 times over. Above them floated the Solari, beings of pure energy that had abandoned physical forms millions of years ago, their luminous bodies pulsing with colors that human eyes could barely perceive. And they looked down at the human ambassador with an ancient indifference that made her skin crawl. The Keth Dominion had sent their war masters, massive creatures covered in natural armor that could stop plasma fire. Their 4 arms crossed over their broad chests as they watched the proceedings with barely concealed boredom. And there were hundreds more species that breathed methane, species that existed partially in other dimensions, species that had fought wars across galaxies when Earth was still a molten ball of rock. Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward to the speaking podium, a device that would translate her words into every language and communication form known to galactic civilization. Honored members of the Conclave, she began, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. Humanity comes before you today not as conquerors or rivals, but as potential partners in the great work of civilization. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly, and Elena could feel it like a physical force pressing against her skin. She continued anyway. We know that we are young by your standards, and we know that our territory is small, consisting of only 47 star systems at the edge of the Orion Arm. But we believe we have something valuable to contribute to this assembly. The HFY Overmind spoke first, its voice a chorus of millions of individual insects speaking in perfect unison, creating a sound that resonated through the hall like thunder. The young species presumes much, it said, and Elena could hear the mockery dripping from every syllable. Tell us, human ambassador, what could your kind possibly offer to civilizations that have existed for millions of years? Elena had prepared for this question, had spent months working with Earth's best diplomats and strategists to craft a perfect response. Knowledge, she said simply, perspective, and a willingness to work together toward common goals. The laughter began with the Keth, a deep rumbling sound that shook the platform beneath Elena's feet, and it spread through the assembly like a wave, each species expressing their amusement in their own way. The Solari flickered with bright pulses of light that Elena's translator helpfully identified as condescending humor. The HFY released a cloud of pheromones that made several nearby species sneeze or cough, even species that Elena had never seen before joined in, their strange bodies producing sounds and signals that all carried the same message. This small, weak, primitive species thought it had something to teach the masters of the galaxy. Elena stood perfectly still and let the laughter wash over her, her face showing no emotion at all, though inside her heart was pounding and her hands wanted to shake. The High Arbiter finally raised one of its manipulator limbs, calling for silence, and the laughter slowly died away, leaving an echo that seemed to hang in the crystalline walls. The Arbiter was an ancient being, a member of a species so old that no one remembered what they had originally called themselves, and its body was more machine than organic now, kept alive by technology that bordered on magic. Human ambassador, the Arbiter said, its voice carrying the weight of ages. We have heard your request for partnership, and we have considered it carefully. Elena knew what was coming, had known since the moment she stepped onto the platform. But she stood tall anyway. The Galactic Conclave has no need for another minor species with delusions of relevance. The Arbiter continued. Your kind has achieved faster than light travel, yes. But so have thousands of other species throughout history. And most of them are now extinct, forgotten. Their worlds recycled by the natural processes of the cosmos. The Arbiter leaned forward, its ancient eyes focusing on Elena with an intensity that made her want to run. Return to your small cluster of worlds, human, and be grateful that the greater powers of this galaxy have no interest in your territory. For if we did, your entire civilization would last less than a single rotation of this station. Elena nodded slowly, as if accepting the judgment, but then she did something unexpected. She smiled. It was a small expression. Just a slight upturn of her lips and a strange light in her eyes. But it made several of the nearest delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. We understand perfectly, Elena said, her voice calm and clear. Thank you for your clarity, High Arbiter. And thank you to all the assembled delegates for taking the time to hear our request. She bowed deeply. A gesture of respect that seemed genuine despite the humiliation she had just endured. Humanity will remember this day, she added. And something in her tone made the Vethkai Overmind's antennae twitch with an emotion it couldn't quite identify. Then Elena Vasquez turned and walked off the platform. Her steps steady and unhurried, her head held high. The human delegation followed her in perfect silence, their faces showing nothing at all. And within minutes they were gone, their ship departing Nexus Prime without incident. The Conclave returned to its business, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes and the thousands of other matters that occupied the attention of galactic powers. And the humans were forgotten almost immediately. Why would anyone remember them? After all, they were just another minor species, one of countless thousands that had risen and fallen throughout galactic history. And they would fade into obscurity like all the others. The elder races were certain of this, as certain as they were of their own superiority and the permanence of their civilizations. They did not notice that. Ambassador Vasquez's smile had lingered even as her ship jumped to hyperspace. They did not wonder why the humans had seemed so calm in the face of such complete rejection. And they certainly did not imagine that in just a few short years, they would be begging those same humans for help while the galaxy burned around them. The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal beings, and the Conclave continued its work, confident that nothing could threaten their ancient order. They were wrong. They were so very wrong. The first warning came from the edge of the outer reach, where a Solari research station had been studying the remnants of a dead star for 3,000 years. One moment the station was transmitting its regular data bursts, filling the communication channels with information about radiation patterns and gravitational anomalies. And the next moment there was nothing, not static, not interference, not even a distress signal, just silence. The Solari High Council dispatched a scout ship to investigate, fully expecting to find some mundane explanation, a equipment malfunction, a communication array failure, something easily fixed and quickly forgotten. What the scout ship found was nothing at all. The station still orbited the dead star, its structure completely intact, its systems still functioning, its lights still glowing in the darkness of space. But every single one of the 47 Solari researchers who had called that station home was gone. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of attack or disaster. The researchers had simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. The Solari reported this incident to the Conclave as a mystery, a curiosity, something to be investigated when more pressing matters were settled. Then it happened again at GN. Keth mining colony in the Varth system went dark. And when the Dominion sent warships to investigate, they found the same impossible seam facilities intact, equipment running, But not a single living being remaining. The Keth blamed the Solari, accusing them of some new weapon or secret plot. The Solari denied everything and accused the Keth of staging the incident to justify a war ancient rivalries flared to life. And the conclave descended into bitter arguments that echoed through the great hall of Nexus Prime. Then a Vethkai broodworld went silent. And suddenly no one was laughing anymore. Broodworlds were the heart of Vethkai civilization, each one home to billions of individual insects, connected through the Overmind's vast neural network. When contact was lost with Hive 7, the Overmind felt it like a wound in its own consciousness. Billions of voices simply cut off, leaving a void of silence where there had once been endless buzzing communication. The Vethkai demanded answers. And for the first time in recorded history, the three great powers worked together, sharing intelligence and pooling resources to understand what was happening. The pattern they discovered made no sense at all. The disappearances were random, striking systems at the edge of known space and systems at the heart of ancient empires with equal unpredictability. There was no connection between the targets, no strategic value, no common resources, no shared history. The only thing the affected systems had in common was that they had contained intelligent life. And now they did not. Someone in the Keth military coined the name that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Devourer. It was a simple word, but it captured the horror of what was happening. The sense that something vast and hungry was moving through the darkness between stars, consuming everything in its path. The elder races mobilized their fleets, assembling armadas of warships that had not been deployed in thousands of years. Ancient weapons were retrieved from vaults and museums. Devices of terrible power that had been sealed away because they were too dangerous to use defense networks were activated. Sensor arrays were expanded, and the great powers prepared to face whatever enemy was hunting them. None of it made any difference. A Solari battle fleet of 300 ships jumped into a system that had reported strange energy readings, and none of those ships ever returned. The Keth Dominion fortified their core worlds with every defensive system they possessed, and the Devourer passed through those defenses as if they did not exist. Taking 17 billion lives in a single night, the Vethkai tried to evacuate their most vulnerable colonies, but the transport ships vanished in transit, their crews and passengers disappearing without a trace. Panic spread through the galaxy like a plague, and billions of beings looked to their leaders for answers, for protection, for some sign that someone knew how to stop what was happening. The leaders had no answers to give. Emergency sessions of the conclave became shouting matches as species blamed each other for the disaster, old hatreds overwhelming the desperate need for cooperation. Some races tried to flee, packing their populations onto generation ships and heading for the void between galaxies, hoping to escape whatever was hunting them. Those ships disappeared too, in the midst of all this chaos. One small cluster of star systems remained completely untouched. Humanity watched from their 47 worlds as the galaxy burned around them, and they said nothing at all. Human ships traveled through afflicted regions without incident, their crews reporting no unusual encounters, no strange phenomena, no sign of the Devourer that was destroying everything else. The elder races were too consumed by their own crises to wonder about this at first. But as the months passed and the death toll climbed into the trillions, some began to notice. Why were the humans untouched? Why did their ships pass safely through space that had swallowed entire armadas? Why did they seem so calm, so unsurprised, as if they had expected all of this to happen? The High Arbiter remembered Ambassador Vasquez's smile, and for the first time in its ancient existence, it felt something very much like fear. The humans knew something. They had to know something, and as the Devourer continued its relentless path of destruction, claiming more worlds and more lives with every passing day, The desperate remnants of galactic civilization began to look toward that small cluster of human systems with a terrible mixture of hope and suspicion. Perhaps the species they had laughed at, the species they had dismissed as irrelevant, held the key to survival. Perhaps humanity had been trying to tell them something important all along, and perhaps, the Arbiter thought as another report of massive casualties crossed its desk, it was finally time to listen. The High Arbiter's ship arrived at Earth's orbital station without the grand ceremony that would have accompanied such a visit in better times. There were no honor guards, no elaborate diplomatic protocols, no pretense of equality between the ancient conclave and the young human species. There was only desperation, raw and undisguised, written in every line of the Arbiter's ancient body as it stepped into the modest reception hall where the humans waited. Admiral Chun Wei stood at the center of the room, flanked by officers in simple uniforms that bore no medals or decorations. And behind him, a wall of windows showed the blue curve of Earth below. Peaceful and untouched while the galaxy burned, the Arbiter was not alone. Representatives of every major power had made this journey together, setting aside rivalries that had lasted millions of years because they had no choice. Because there was nowhere else to turn, the Vethkai Overmind had sent a speaker. A single insect body that carried a fragment of the collective consciousness. And it stood clicking nervously beside a Solari delegate whose light had dimmed to a pale shadow of its former brilliance. The Keth War Master looked diminished somehow, its massive body seeming smaller than it should be, and its 4 hands were empty of weapons for the first time anyone could remember. These were the rulers of the galaxy, the masters of civilizations that spanned thousands of star systems. And they had come to beg for help from a species they had laughed at less than 3 years ago. Admiral Chun Wei waited in silence as the delegation arranged themselves before him. And he let that silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until the alien visitors began to shift and fidget with anxiety. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. "We require your assistance," it said. And the words seemed to cause it physical pain. As if each syllable was a wound, Chen Wei nodded slowly, but said nothing. The Arbiter continued, its voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. "Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are dying, and the Devourer cannot be stopped by any weapon or strategy we possess. And we cannot reason with it because we cannot even perceive it clearly enough to attempt communication." The Solari delegate pulsed with dim light. "We have studied the pattern of attacks," it said, "and we have analyzed every piece of data we could gather. And in our desperation, we noticed something that we had overlooked before. Your species has not been targeted." The Vethkai speaker clicked. "Your ships pass through afflicted regions without harm, and your worlds remain untouched while everything around them burns." The Keth War Master leaned forward, its eyes fixed on Chen Wei with an intensity that would have made most beings step backward. "You know something," it growled. "You have something, and we need to know what it is." Admiral Chen Wei allowed himself a small smile, and the alien delegates flinched as if he had drawn a weapon. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "the Devourer simply has not noticed us yet after all. We are a minor species with delusions of relevance. And why would a cosmic entity bother with such an insignificant target?" The High Arbiter closed its ancient eyes, and when it spoke again, its voice was barely a whisper. "We were wrong," it said. "We were arrogant and blind and foolish, and we dismissed you when we should have listened. And now trillions have died because of our pride. Whatever price you demand," the Solari delegate added. "Whatever concessions you require, we will pay it. Just tell us how to stop this." Chan Wei's smile faded, replaced by an expression that was harder to read. Something between sadness and determination. "You misunderstand us," he said. "Humanity does not want payment, and we never did." He raised his hand. and the windows behind him transformed into display screens, filling with star maps and data that made the alien delegates gasp and stare. "We want you to listen," Chun Wei continued. "Finally. Truly listen to what we have been trying to tell you since the day we first achieved faster-than-light travel." The map showed patterns that the elder races had never seen, connections and correlations that span the entire galaxy, centered on regions so old that even the Solari had no records of what had existed there 300 years ago. When our first interstellar ships made contact with Solari scouts, we tried to share what we had discovered, Chun Wei said. "We were told that young species should not burden their elders with primitive superstitions." The Solari delegate flickered with what might have been shame 200 years ago. "We presented our findings to the Vethkai Overmind, and we were told that collective intelligence would always be superior to individual speculation." The speaker's clicking became erratic and distressed. 100 years ago, we warned the Keth Dominion directly, and we were told that warriors do not fear ghost stories. The War Master's hands clenched into fists, but it said nothing. And 3 years ago, Ambassador Vasquez stood before the full conclave and tried one last time to get your attention. And you laughed at her, and you sent her away. And you congratulated yourselves on putting another presumptuous young species in its place. Chun Wei gestured at the maps behind him. "This is what we found in our first decade of interstellar travel. A signal buried in the cosmic background radiation. A warning encoded in the very fabric of space itself, left by beings who called themselves the architects." The display zoomed in on a pattern so vast that it could only be seen when viewing the entire galaxy at once. A sleeping shape that stretched across the oldest regions of space. "The architects came before everything," Chun Wei said. "Before the Solari, before the Vethkai, before any species that exists today. And they left this warning because they knew that someday something would wake up." The High Arbiter stared at the display, understanding dawning in its ancient eyes. "You knew," it whispered. "All this time, you knew what the Devourer was, and you knew it was coming." "Yes," Chun Wei said simply. "We tried to tell you, and you laughed." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the station systems and the quiet breathing of beings who had just realized that everything they thought they knew was wrong. "Is there still time?" the Arbiter finally asked. "Is there anything that can be done?" Admiral Chun Wei looked at the desperate faces before him, at the shattered remnants of civilizations that had once ruled the galaxy, and he nodded slowly. "The architects did not just leave a warning," he said. "They left a chance. And humanity has spent 3 centuries preparing to use it." He turned toward the door, gesturing for the delegates to follow. "Come with us," he said. "It is time to show you what we have built." The transport descended through the thin atmosphere of Mars, passing over rust-red deserts and ancient crater fields that humanity had studied for centuries before ever setting foot on their surface. The alien delegates pressed against the windows like children, watching the barren landscape scroll past beneath them, and none of them could understand why they had been brought to this dead world. The High Arbiter's sensors detected no significant technology, no hidden bases, no sign of the weapon that the humans had promised to show them, just sand and rock and the endless silence of a planet that had never known life. Then the transport began to descend toward a mountain range in the northern hemisphere, and the ground opened beneath them. What had appeared to be solid rock split apart to reveal an entrance, large enough to swallow a small city, and the transport dropped into darkness, falling for so long that even the Solari delegate began to flicker with anxiety. When the lights finally returned, the alien visitors found themselves in a world that should not exist. The cavern stretched beyond the limits of their senses, a space so vast that it seemed to have its own weather systems, with clouds drifting far overhead and strange winds carrying scents that no one could identify. Human structures dotted the cavern floor like a city built by giants. But between those familiar buildings stood things that were clearly not of human origin. Devices and monuments and machines that predated every civilization in the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo met them at the landing pad. A small woman with gray hair and eyes that carried a weight of knowledge that seemed impossible for someone so young by galactic standards. "Welcome to the archive," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. This facility was built by the architects approximately 4 billion years ago, and humanity discovered it during our first unmanned mission to Mars, the Vethkai. Speaker's antennae twitched with disbelief. 4 billion years. It clicked. That is older than any known civilization. Older than most of the stars in this region of the galaxy. Yes, Dr. Okonkwo agreed. Leading the group deeper into the cavern, the architects were the first intelligent species to arise in this galaxy, and they had billions of years to develop and grow before something went wrong. The Keth War Master's eyes narrowed. What went wrong? It demanded. Dr. Okonkwo stopped before a wall covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when viewed directly. Patterns that made the mind ache with their complexity. They became too successful, she said. They spread across every star system, solved every problem, achieved every goal. And eventually, they realized that they had nothing left to strive for. The Solari delegate pulsed with recognition. Stagnation, it said. The death of purpose, exactly, and they were not the only ones to face this fate. For the architects discovered that every sufficiently advanced civilization eventually reached the same point. A moment when growth stopped and decay began. She gestured at the symbols on the wall. So they built a solution. A mechanism woven into the fabric of the galaxy itself, designed to prevent any civilization from reaching that point of terminal stagnation. The High Arbiter's ancient processors worked to understand what it was hearing. The Devourer, it said slowly. The Devourer is not an enemy. It is a tool. A reset button, Dr. Okonkwo confirmed. When civilizations grow too proud, too certain, too unchanging, the Devourer wakes and clears the way for new growth. The Keth War Master slammed one of its massive fists against a nearby pillar. Then we cannot fight it, it roared. If it is built into the galaxy itself, if it is meant to destroy us, then all of this is pointless. No, Dr. Okonkwo said firmly. The architects knew that a reset mechanism could be abused, could become too destructive, could wipe out species that still had potential. So they built in a safeguard. She led them through a doorway that should not have fit in the wall that contained it, into a chamber that existed partially outside normal space. And at the center of that chamber stood a machine that hurt to look at directly. It was not large by the standards of galactic technology, perhaps the size of a human building, but it seemed to contain infinities, folding in on itself in ways that made the alien visitors feel dizzy and small. This is the modifier, Dr. Okonkwo said, and it allows the Devourer's programming to be changed. The Solari delegate drifted closer to the machine. It's like reflecting strangely off surfaces that should not exist. How? It asked. The Devourer judges civilizations based on a template, Dr. Okonkwo explained. A baseline standard of what intelligent life should be. And any species that deviates too far from that template, that becomes too rigid or too aggressive or too stagnant, is marked for removal. Admiral Jian Wei stepped forward, his hands moving over controls that responded only to human neural patterns. But the template can be changed, he said. A new baseline can be established, one that values growth and diversity and change. One that recognizes potential rather than punishing difference. And how is this new template created? The High Arbiter asked. Already suspecting the answer, Chen Wei met the ancient being's gaze without flinching. A species must volunteer to become the template, he said. They must offer their essence, their fundamental nature, to be woven into the Devourer's core programming, and in doing so, they become the standard against which all other civilizations are measured. The implications of this hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. You are going to sacrifice yourselves. The Vethkai speaker clicked, its voice filled with something that might have been horror or might have been awe, not sacrifice, Chan Wei corrected. Transform, for humanity will not cease to exist. But we will become something more, something that is part of the galaxy's fundamental structure. Every civilization that arises from this point forward will carry a piece of us, Dr. Okonkwo added. Our curiosity, our stubbornness, our refusal to accept that things cannot change. These qualities will become part of the universe's definition of intelligent life. The Keth War Master stared at the humans with an expression no one had ever seen on a Keth face before. Why? It asked simply. Why would you do this for species that laughed at you, that dismissed you, that treated you as insignificant? Admiral Shen Wei smiled. And this time the expression carried no mockery, only a deep and genuine warmth. Because someone had to, he said. And you were not willing, you were too proud, too certain of your own superiority, too convinced that nothing needed to change. He turned back to the machine, its impossible geometries reflecting in his eyes. Humanity has always known that we are small, he continued. We have always known that the universe is vast and dangerous and indifferent. And that knowledge has shaped us. It has made us reach for connection with others. It has made us value every moment of existence. Those are the qualities that will define the new template, Dr. Okonkwo said. Not power or conquest or dominance, but hope and cooperation and the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. The High Arbiter stepped forward, its ancient body trembling with emotions it had not felt in millions of years. We laughed at you, it said. We dismissed you as irrelevant, and now you are going to save us all. Yes, Admiral Chen Wei said simply. We are, because that is what humanity does. We survive, we adapt, we help each other, and we never, ever give up. He reached for the controls, and the machine began to hum with power that made the very air vibrate. It is time, he said. The galaxy has waited long enough. The machine activated with a sound that was not a sound, a frequency that bypassed ears and sensors, entirely and resonated through every conscious mind in the galaxy simultaneously on Earth. Billions of humans stopped whatever they were doing and looked up at the sky, feeling something vast and ancient turn its attention toward them on Mars. In the archive chamber, Admiral Chen Wei stood at the center of a light that had no source. His body lifted slightly off the ground as energies older than the stars flowed through him and into the machine across the galaxy. The Devourer paused and had been moving toward a cluster of refugee ships, the last survivors of a dozen species fleeing from its unstoppable advance, and now it hung motionless in the void, its incomprehensible form flickering and shifting as something fundamental changed within its core. The alien delegates watched through displays that struggled to capture what was happening. Their various sensory organs, overwhelmed by inputs that defied understanding, Dr. Okonkwo stood beside the High Arbiter, both of them silent as they witnessed something that no being had seen in 4 billion years. What is happening to them? The Arbiter asked, its voice barely a whisper. They are being translated, Dr. Okonkwo said. Every human consciousness, every memory and dream and hope, all of it is being encoded into a new template on every human world. The experience was the same. People felt a warmth spreading through them, not painful but profound, as if every moment of their lives was being read and understood and appreciated for the first time. They felt connections forming between themselves and others, links that transcended distance and time. and they understood that they were becoming part of something larger than any individual could comprehend. A child in Beijing reached out and felt her grandmother's love. Separated by death for 3 years, but suddenly present and real. A soldier on a colony world felt the fear leave his body, replaced by a calm certainty that everything was going to be all right. An old man dying in a hospital bed smiled and closed his eyes, knowing that nothing of what he had been would truly be lost. The light in the archive chamber grew brighter, and Admiral Chen Wei's body began to fade, not dying but transforming, his physical form becoming less solid as his essence joined the flow of energy pouring into the machine. "Tell them," he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Tell them we forgive them for laughing." Then he was gone, and with him went something from every human being in the galaxy. A piece of their collective soul offered freely to reshape the fundamental nature of existence. The light reached a peak that forced even the Solari to look away. And then it was over. Silence fell across the archive chamber, broken only by the soft breathing of the alien delegates and the distant hum of ancient machinery settling back into dormancy. Dr. Okonkwo wiped tears from her eyes and stepped forward to examine the displays. "It worked," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The template has been changed across the galaxy." The effects were immediate and unmistakable. The Devourer completed its transformation, its vast form rippling and reshaping itself according to new instructions. And when it moved again, it passed by the refugee ships without touching them, without even acknowledging their existence on Keth worlds. Warriors felt strange new emotions stirring in their hearts. Doubt and mercy, and the desire to understand rather than destroy. The Vethkai Overmind experienced something unprecedented as individual insects began to develop independent thoughts and feelings, not separating from the collective, but adding new dimensions to it. The Solari blazed with colors they had not displayed in millions of years, their ancient detachment melting away as they remembered what it felt like to care about something beyond pure knowledge. Every species in the galaxy felt the change, a subtle but undeniable shift in the way they perceived themselves and each other, the qualities that had defined humanity, their curiosity and stubbornness and hope, their refusal to accept that things could not improve. These traits were now woven into the very fabric of consciousness itself. The High Arbiter stood in the archive chamber for a long time, processing what it had witnessed, what it had felt flowing through its ancient circuits. "They saved us," it finally said. "After everything we did, after all the mockery and dismissal. They saved us anyway." Dr. Okonkwo nodded slowly. "That is what humanity does," she said. "Or rather, that is what humanity did. And now it is what everyone does. Because that is the template now." 50 years later, the Galactic Conclave convened for the first time since the crisis, gathering in the rebuilt halls of Nexus Prime to establish a new order for the galaxy. The crystalline walls still glittered with the light of artificial suns, but the atmosphere in the chamber was different now, warmer and more open, marked by genuine curiosity rather than ancient arrogance. Ambassador Vasquez walked to the speaking platform, named for her grandmother, who had stood in the same place so many years ago, and looked out at the assembled delegates with eyes that carried both human determination and something new, something that transcended species entirely. She was the first of a new generation, humans who had been born after the transformation. And like all beings born since that day, she carried the template within her, a spark of the humanity that had been sacrificed to save everyone. "My grandmother told me about the first time she addressed this assembly," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "She told me you laughed at her." The delegates shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. "She said she understood why you laughed. Because you were old and proud and certain that nothing new could ever come from a young species like us." Vasquez paused. letting the silence build. But she also told me that she smiled as she left this chamber. Because she knew something you did not. She knew that being young was not a weakness. She knew that humanity's short history had taught us things that billions of years of civilization had made you forget. She gestured at the assembled beings. At the Keth, who had learned compassion. At the Vethkai, who had discovered individuality. At the Solari, who had remembered passion. She knew that every ending is also a beginning. That change is not something to fear, but something to embrace. And that the smallest voice can sometimes speak the most important truth. The delegates listened in silence, and not one of them felt the urge to laugh. Humanity gave everything so that you could learn these lessons. Vasquez continued. My grandmother's generation chose to become part of the galaxy itself, rather than let you be destroyed by your own pride. She smiled. The same strange smile that had confused the alien delegates so many years ago, but now they understood it. Now they could read the hope and determination and forgiveness that it contained. The galaxy does not laugh at new voices anymore, she said. The stars do not dismiss young species as irrelevant, because humanity's final gift was to make sure that no one would ever be ignored again. She bowed deeply, just as her grandmother had done. But this time, the gesture was met with something other than mockery. Every delegate in the chamber rose, each expressing respect in the way of their species. A thunder of sound and light and emotion that shook the crystalline walls. The galactic conclave changed, and with it the entire course of civilization. Not because humanity had conquered or demanded or forced, but because they had offered themselves freely, without anger or resentment, to save those who had once dismissed them. And somewhere in the fundamental structure of the universe, woven into the template that would guide intelligent life for billions of years to come, a spark of human consciousness stirred and smiled. The galaxy had laughed when humanity spoke, but in the end, the stars remembered, and they would remember forever.